Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Day 2 of the Vainglory 8 Challenge Battles. My name is Munchables, and we have some action-packed games coming your way. It's time to decide who our 3 teams are from each region. They're going to be moving on to our Vainglory 8. I'm going to be joined once again by Tasty Bacon and Dragonborn as we head on into the action today. How are we doing, guys? Have we had a good sleep? Ready for more action?
Absolutely ready for more action. Can't wait to see if some of the upsets that came through yesterday are going to continue on through today. Lots of big games.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of big games and a lot of deciders, especially for you, Dragonborn. You've been watching these teams make it through challenges, and now this is finally crunch time for them.
Absolutely. This is going to be incredible. We've seen some massive upsets yesterday, as you guys were alluding to. And, of course, a lot is on the line for these teams. You know, you make it or break it if you want to get into the VG8. So I'm excited to get into it, actually, because these are going to be some good matches.
Yeah, they certainly are. Let's have a look at our format. For anyone that missed the games yesterday, the way this tournament is working is it's a bunch of best-of-3 games. The Vainglory 8 teams will play one best-of-3 against each of the Challenger teams, and vice versa as well. So if you're Challenger, you will only play against Vainglory 8, and if you are Vainglory 8, you will only play against Challenger. At the end of the weekend, at the end of today, the teams with the best win percentage across their games will be moving forward into the Vainglory 8. Now, later on today, we're going to have our North American games. That is going to be starting at 1:30 p.m. PDT, which is the time here in California, but we're going to be kicking off with Europe first, and boy do we have some matchups in Europe. A lot of very important games coming up today, and a lot of quite surprising results coming out yesterday. In fact, in both regions especially, it's a lot of the teams I feel like have either underestimated their opponents coming in or have stepped up to a level that we weren't necessarily expecting coming in today.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Avalanche, a team that a lot of people thought were just going to roll over and probably get eliminated very quickly, actually be able to pick up a series win. We've seen, obviously, Calamity we kind of expected to really take off, and they have definitely lived up to expectations, but in a way that I think some people weren't expecting. Like, they just have looked dominant in their games.
And, I mean, yesterday, one of the huge upsets was the fact that Hammers managed to take on Immortals and won that series 2-0. That was a result I don't think anyone was expecting.
No, we were not expecting that whatsoever. They did show up. I mean, it's worth noting that they are a Vainglory 8 team. They've been playing against the best. But when we take a look at those games, they were off stream, but they are viewable on YouTube right now to watch. It's interesting to see how that unfolded. I think that Immortals may have been surprised a little bit in the draft. There were some maybe a little bit, meta picks that maybe come together in a way that I think surprised us a little bit. We'll definitely be talking more about that matchup when we get into North America.
Yeah, we'll get to that later on today. We've got to do Europe first. And speaking of, let's have a look at where everybody stands in Europe right now. Calamity up at the top with 4 points. Queso following them on 3. Then Salty Potatoes and Avalanche on 2 points apiece. Now, we've got G2 down at the bottom on 0 points. They have 2 matchups today. There is still chance for them to make it on in Reliable Union. However, unfortunately, due to tiebreakers and things, there is no way they can make it into the Vainglory 8 anymore. So they are out of the running. We'll see who can make it by the end of today. In about 4 hours' time, we will know who has made it at this point. But I want to bring the conversation around to one player specifically. Yesterday, one of the Calamity players really stepped up. It was Aeon. Leon has always been the guy that, with this team, everybody looks at, but Aeon yesterday had a stellar performance.
Yeah, bring out this pedal in 2 games on the mainstream was absolutely phenomenal with it. Obviously, required the help of his teammates to get to these points, but this early game play with the 2 of them in the jungle was just absolutely incredible. He was able to set up so many kills with this pedal, able to help Leon stay alive when needed in the later stages of the game. It's a pick that we had seen once in the entire first 4 weeks of Vainglory 8 play, and he pulls it out in consecutive games and really controls the game match with it.
Now, I do want to very quickly talk about the rest of Calamity and them as an organization, because with how strong they looked against G2 yesterday, and the fact that due to tiebreakers, they've actually qualified now for the Vainglory 8, how do we feel they're going to be going into this Vainglory 8, do we think that this is a team that can really contend for the top spots? Because to me, it's starting to look that way, Dragonborn.
It really is. This is a team that's very aggressive early. They're playing at the level and kind of the play style that you would expect to see from a VGA team. They're also very coordinated. The synergy you just saw in that replay is when the gauntlet comes down with an Arden, they're all moving into positions they know they can get the best advantage from, and they're doing it instantaneously. These guys are the real deal, and if you're a top Vainglory 8 team in Europe right now, you're going to be a little worried seeing these guys come in.
Yeah, you've got to keep your eye on these games and figure out what their weaknesses are so that you can come in strong next week in the Vainglory 8. But it's time to get on to our first game. Now, we already mentioned them briefly. G2 is going to be one of our squads coming into this first matchup. Keanu Nakoa, Hundor, and Dark Potato. Now, these guys yesterday didn't have that strong of a showing. However, it was against Calamity Reborn, this team that has a lot of hype coming in. G2 have to perform today if they want to stay in the Vainglory 8.
Yeah, they absolutely have to. They need to pick up these points. They have 2 matches today. They need wins if they want to try and get in because they are trailing behind. And they have a tough matchup right off the bat. Salty Potatoes.
Yes.
I mean, if we go back and look at the challengers, Salty Potatoes gave Calamity Reborn a big run for their money. And the fact that G2 kind of just got rolled by Calamity, that's worrisome. I mean, Salty Potatoes have been able to stand up to Calamity. G2 was not. So now the pressure is just mounting for G2 in this matchup.
Yeah, it certainly is. And let's talk about Salty Potatoes, their opponents. Now, yesterday, as you rightly said, Salty Potatoes looking pretty good. We've got some serious names on here, and Sneaky finally managing to get his revenge on Reliable Union yesterday. But Salty Potatoes coming into this matchup, as Bacon already said, in the challenge battles against Calamity, they looked great. Calamity then kind of rolled over G2. Are Salty Potatoes now the favorite going into this Dragonborn?
I think they definitely have an edge here. They played really, really well yesterday. We saw a lot of matchups. And G2, honestly, not showing the kind of three-dimensional hero pool we'd like to see. Very much just a lot of Vox play in the lane. Now, we did see Vox play coming out of in game number 1 here. You see right here it's Sneaky. So, both players feel great on this. But I think the big star here was just Kaelast. He was fantastic as a support, and that's really going to be a difference maker. And I feel like when it came to draft specifically, we did see that Salty Potatoes were very willing to focus on true counters, not just playing comfort picks.
Yes, certainly. Now, the matchup for this game, it's going to be our captains coming into this one. Keanu Nakoa and, is it Kaelast? I'm not 100% sure. I've heard it pronounced both ways at this stage. Now, I do just want to say the statistics on your screen are based solely on on-stream games yesterday. So, Keanu Nakoa, that's not including his Vainglory 8 statistics, as we only have the statistics for the challenge battles here. Otherwise, it'd be a little bit unfair comparing, 20 games to just 2. So, Class, though, amazing KDA, 11.5 KDA, which, you can get high KDAs as a captain, but that is exceptional.
Yeah, and this kind of speaks to the kind of matchup that these two teams had yesterday. With G2 really struggling, Keanu still managed to keep a steady KDA, not falling into the negatives there, but you see Salty Potatoes, they just performed so well, but they can't get complacent. That's the key for them coming into this matchup, because G2 is a squad that can be the best in Europe. I mean, we've seen them be the best in Europe. They won week 3 of the Vainglory 8. They just haven't been able to put it together aside from that 1 week, and they need to have a week 3 type performance today. Otherwise, they will not be returning to the Vainglory 8.
It is win or die right now for G2. And I want to start to talk about G2's draft, because yesterday they didn't have the most convincing performance in the world. Was it draft specific? Is there something that they need to change in terms of the draft Dragonborn that they can change today to make their performance better?
Well, I alluded to it earlier. They really didn't show a preference to truly counter or try to dig deep into the hero pool. It was very much like Vox first pick on both games, at least the ones that we saw. And that's problematic. If you're too consistent, teams can pick around you and anticipate you. And I think that's what happened. Calamity, of course, really deep, pulling out surprise picks. We didn't see anything that really struck us as, all right, they're really trying to pull something unique and take us very seriously. I think they unfortunately were playing to things that they felt were their strengths.
So you want to see something special coming out of them, a little bit of pizzazz coming into these games. We'll see whether they are going to bring that one in, as the draft is going to be underway.
Yeah, I want to see from G2, I want to see them go back to their roots, go back to what has been historically very strong for them, and that's putting Dark Potato onto a more of a bruiser type of jungler. He played the Blackfeather and the Baptiste yesterday. Both of them are a little bit more, obviously the Blackfeather's a little bit more assassin type, whereas the Baptiste is a little bit more of that,
Hey man, when your passive goes off, you can act like an assassin for sure.
But they're both very much heavy damage dealers about burst and assassinating targets. I want to see Dark Potato on a bigger bruiser type pick.
All right, Dragonborn catches up on this draft because we have a Lyra and Vox first pick here.
So this is like the first time we're seeing G2 not first pick Vox. They are going to go with the Lyra, and I think that's kind of smart here. You're not giving away how you're going to go into the lane jungle. You're not giving away your carries yet, and Lyra is a fantastic healer. With Grace off the board, she arguably is the best support that you can pick first in any kind of draft situation. Vox is going to be picked up by Salty Potatoes. We did see how well that they do play the Joker, Sneaky playing Vox last game yesterday, and Idris is going to be the ban. I think that G2 now has the opportunity to dictate when they get the next two picks, how they want to go in. I really, like Tasty said, love to see something in the jungle that's really, really tanky and strong that can get into the face of Salty Potatoes.
Taking away the Samuel, I think, is a good idea here. If you want to go for one of those melee bruisers, Samuel can deal with them extremely well. So taking that off the board frees them up now to go for one of these. Kestrel is a very likely pick to come out from the side of G2 just because it's a very strong pick. Can go into the jungle lane, would really prefer to see it in the lane for them. But they could still switch it up. I just feel like if you're going to go for a laner, it's got to be either the Kestrel or the Glaive at this point.
Now, looking towards Salty Potatoes, at this composition specifically, this is the composition that Fnatic destroyed G2 with. If they lock in a Scarf to finish it off, that was a composition that G2 just didn't seem to have an answer for. Do we think that Salty Potatoes are maybe looking at that and trying to build that kind of thing, or is it just that these are two solid picks so far?
Well, Salty Potato also could be looking at yesterday, and they could see the Ardent Petal pick that Calamity used was very effective as well. So if you're G2, you're afraid of both that Scarf and that Petal in the jungle. Both are going to be strong in the late game. They're going to have a lot of CP damage. So the Grump Drop pick comes out. We talked about this yesterday. If it is a weapon Grumpjaw, that means we expect to see something in the lane. It's going to be a Ringo. It could be that CP Ringo EU loves to play.
I hope it's not. I've never, ever been sold on a CP Ringo. It has worked like occasionally, but I'd say less than 20% of the games that we see CP Ringo does it have a massive effect. It's just way too easy to counter. I would prefer to see this be something like a double weapon with the Grumpjaw going for the the Tension Bow double monocle and then build two defensive items. He ends up being a fairly tanky bruiser type hero in the jungle, which is what I really want to see Dark Potato on.
Yeah, so Salty Potato now has an opportunity here to take a look and try to counter just the Grumpjaw. But I like the fact that they did put a range with the Grumpjaw. Double melee would have been very dangerous. It is good to be the Scarf. You alluded to, this is what Fnatic ran.
Maybe Salty Potato is trying to create some PTSD in amongst the G2 roster. It's certainly a composition that's worked against them in the past. We haven't seen Salty Potatoes play this roster specifically, or maybe we have in challenge battles. I certainly haven't seen them bring it to the table. We'll see what G2 have up their sleeves to be able to take on this composition. Certainly didn't manage to play around it last time, but they were on a different composition as well.
They were, but coming to this one, I think the Scarf is such a smart pick. A Scarf is very strong into the Grumpjaw. As soon as Grumpjaw tries to jump in, you just drop a goop underneath him, and then no matter what he does, either he gets onto a target or if he stuffs the target, he's not going to be getting very far away from there. So Scarf has been consistently one of the counters that has been used against Grumpjaw.
So in this matchup then, with the Lyra Grumpjaw, is it G2 really going to have to be aggressive in the jungle to shut down this Scarf, so that can't happen?
Yeah, and this is something we've seen some of these EU teams struggle with, is early game Scarf seems to still find a way to deal with that damage. They're not aggressive enough, and I think you just need a team-wide coordination here. Early game, first rotation, take that Scarf off the map right away, steal some of that jungle. If they do that, they'll have a good success, but we've often seen the Scarf instead being the ones aggressing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've often said G2 need to be on the front foot. They need to make things happen. We'll see if they can in this game. It's time to jump into our first series of the game. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter to let us know whether you're supporting G2 or Salty Potatoes. But it's time to jump onto the Halcyon Fold.
Thank you very much, Munchables. It's myself, Darcy, joined by Scoundrel once more to see which one of these European teams will be progressing into Split 2 of this Vainglory 8 summer season. G2 and Salty Potatoes, whoever wins this series has put themselves in a very good position to secure that Vainglory 8 spot.
Yeah, Hundor starting off the Weapon Blade here. Probably more likely to be a Weapon Power Ringo because it does do fairly well against Vox in lane. Vox hasn't gone for a Book of Eulogies, so it's a bit more of a lane that, you know, Ringo can punish a bit harder. And you can see Arden going for an Iron Guard contract. That looks to me like they know this could be a fairly difficult lane for Sneaky to function in the early game. And that's why, you know, just going to see that come out. And so hopefully Sneaky will be able to last out because Hundor does have the trading advantage as a Ringo, especially early on here.
And the Joker able to secure all of his back camps there despite the pressure Keanu Koa did put onto him. The little scarf here. Dark Potato with boots as his first purchase, as well as that Weapon Blade, means that he can clear the jungle very quickly with his B. And then if he wants to, can look for invades onto the scarf or perhaps a gank into the lane with that extra momentum. Does look like him and Keanu Koa are going to start progressing towards the back here and try and put the pressure over onto the Joker. And with Classed in lane, this is going to be the Joker pretty much just under fire. Able to secure his Treant, gets the healing as well, but this is most likely going to be his double backs here, stolen away by Dark Potato. Although they're not body blocking the Spitfires, that is one going over by the group. And actually they can look to chase this. That's boots popped. Bright Bullet goes down. It looks like this will be G2 running away, Hundor with a quick rotation, but I love this movement from Sneaky. Instantly into the backs of the opposing jungle, trying to secure some farm back for his team.
Yeah, that was a really good move because most of that was secured by Joker. They're actually going to continue to pressure here because a collapse can come through. Dark Potato moves back in. I think he's just giving up his life.
That
giving up his life.
That is a poor move by G2. This is not a winning move by G2. Hundor, does he get his block stop? No, he doesn't. Wow, Salty Potatoes have completely turned this around. G2 overstayed, and, you know, people like the Scarf into Grumpjaw matchup purely just because the goop removes the living armor stacks immediately at Scoundrel, which means that the Grumpjaw becomes instantly less tanky. But Scarf can punish at range this Grumpjaw. Grumpjaw, you know, if you can get on top of a squishy target, then he can blow them up. But to get towards that Scarf, he has to go through Spitfires, he has to get through goops, and Joker, if he keeps him on a leash, actually has a bit of an advantage in this matchup.
Yeah, this is a tough matchup to punish the Scarf in, especially as you need to be able to collapse on him so easily and so early. If you let him get away with like he has done, he'll get to Frostburn and he'll be able to consistently kite backwards against the Grumpjaw. I mean, you're really going to be looking for early movement speed here for G2. They're going to have to rush their target. This is a composition that is going to fall off, and actually I say it's going to be Weapon Power Ringo. Looks like it's actually going to be the CP Ringo coming out. This is really interesting because I assumed that it was going to likely be a CP Weapon Power Ringo to punish the Vox, but the way that a CP Ringo works in this composition is that you don't need to commit with a Hellfire Brew. You can just spam that Hellfire Brew and it's going to deal significant damage to a target regardless of whether they have a reflex block or not, because the initial burst is very, very high. And Dark Potato going the Weapon Power Grumpjaw means he's not going to fall off as hard in the late game. He's going to go likely that Tension Bow double monocle build, and that's going to allow him, if he does with War Treads, they might even go double War Treads, run at a target and just consistently pressure them with high volumes of damage. Dark Potato actually steals away that Elder Treant here, so it's kind of just putting a band-aid, plaster, over the wound of that early game, and G2 are kind of shoring things up, and it gives them some late game prowess as well, having that CP Ringo in tow.
Joker got a bit of a CS lead here, an experience lead for sure as well over Dark Potato, who was looking for another push into the jungle. Does move up into the lane and he will be heading to his backs. And, you know, Hundor has been playing a bit of CP Ringo recently in the old solo or three-man queue. So perhaps this is something that G2 just have been hiding up their sleeves, though I have to agree with Tasty Bacon's thoughts, or at least initial feelings on the CP Ringo, is that we just haven't seen success realistically in the Western Hemisphere on this CP Ringo yet, as it has to play so far back, it has to be positioned perfectly. As soon as you go for a Hellfire Brew, that can be punished, especially with an Arden and the Gauntlet, and Echo being so prominent.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, but also I think there is limited punishment from from Salty Potatoes. I think the Gauntlet is the only thing that can punish. And if you can get out of that, as well as the Crucible and Reflex block, there isn't anything left to punish the CP Ringo. The issue with the CP Ringo is that a Reflex block shuts you down so hard that you almost need an Echo for your own. And that limits one of the CP items that you can pick up in the late game, although it does give you that ability to just double Hellfire Brew a single target. But Hellfire Brew really does shut down a Ringo. For the simple fact that a large portion of Hellfire Brew's damage does come from that burn damage, which can be blocked through a simple reflex block pickup by any of the carries. So the problem for me is that I don't think there's huge amounts of way to punish the CP Ringo. Yes, you can get an engage with the Gauntlet, but remember you can just portal out of that if Keanu Nakoa is in the right area. The problem for me is that I don't see how it wins. It's never going to out-damage a Scarf in the late game on a consistent basis. So you're either going to be looking to just War Treads in, Dark Potatoes focus a target, and then use the Hellfire Brew to finish the job. But the Hellfire Brew is the only thing that realistically is going to get Reflex block apart from the Grumpjaw ultimate. So there's not many ways to get the sort of the late game damage of the CP Ringo through.
Yeah, no, I feel like once Joker hits his, Broken Myth Eve of Harvest state on this Scarf, then actually a Dragon's Breath also puts the pressure onto Hundor, who's going to be standing still and channeling a Hellfire Brew. Makes him such an easy target to be burnt to a crisp. So there's potential for win conditions to be met for G2, don't get us wrong, but the potential...
Their single target focus is really good, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
You have the ability to stick a Grumpjaw on someone. Maybe you look to do just sort of stuffed on classed, so you eat classed, and then you just charge with War Treads at the target. Hellfire Brew comes down, Achilles Shot to slow them as well. So the combination of Achilles Shot and a Grumpjaw chasing down a target is really good too, because it makes them so incredibly slow. But that's such a unique set of win conditions for a team fight that a lot of it, I almost feel like more can go wrong with that specific set of win conditions than can go right. So I think it's such a hard team fight to execute properly that I think G2 could struggle.
Well, we are at this 7-minute mark here, and G2 looking like they want to take a gold miner for themselves with the Weapon Power Grumpjaw. Very good objective control, and they'll be able to eat that one nicely. We'll get spotted here by Class. The Joker won't be able to steal it away, though. Let's go over to G2, get themselves 240 gold each into the pocket, and gives them a bit of a buffer as far as gold is concerned, brings them back to even. But, we'll have to see how this one does go, because CP Ringo loves to scale, Vox wants to scale, Scarf wants to scale. Of course, this Grumpjaw wanted to snowball, but unfortunately has been denied that chance at this current point in the game. And so we're currently heading down the old European track here at Scoundrel of 3 damage items being waited on before big team fights happen.
Yeah, I think that's playing to the win conditions as well for a lot of these teams. You want to get Joker to the late game, you want to get now the CP Ringo to the late game. No reflex blocks or reflex blocks on everybody. Literally reflex blocks on everybody. So everyone respecting the damage of that Hellfire Brew now, and that's a very important move. And often when you are faced with a composition like this, you have to invest into defense. You go against the Koshka, you need a reflex block by level 6. Same with a CP Ringo in a lot of instances, because that can just ruin your day if there's no way to block that out.
Ooh,
that's a bit
Sneaky wants to fight here. That is the Gauntlet, though, being denied. Great Bright Bulwark by Keanu Nakoa. That's going to be a Fountain popped as well to get Hundor and Dark Potato up to some full HP before this siege does start by Salty Potatoes.
They're going to start to clear the waves out nicely. Look at Dark Potato. He's picked up a heavy steal here, Dalsy. Not the traditional double Tyrant's Monocle tension bow build that we have seen a lot of Weapon Power Grumpjaw's favourite in the past months. It looks like he could be working towards a Sorrow Blade. So Sorrow Blade, Tension Bow, maybe a critical strike item after that, or a breaking point. That'll be a very interesting Grumpjaw build. There's the stuff onto Arden.
Yeah, stuff onto Arden. There's the Spitfire, but he's going to be dropped so far back. The Dragon's Breath coming through. Dark Potato, there's no Fountain to keep him alive. They're all going very low, and Sneaky won. Sneaky for a second as well. If he can get onto Keanu Nakoa here with a couple more auto attacks, there it is. 2 kills over to Salty Potatoes. Class will drop that turret aggro. They will reset the aggro. They will take a turret as well, Scoundrel. And Salty Potato is able to execute off that Stuffed, which could have had Class losing his life.
And I think that's one of the... I think what you mentioned in the fight there was one of the major issues why that went wrong. You didn't have a Fountain. Like, I think rule number one of Vainglory team fights is if you don't have a fountain, you don't team fight, because it's such an integral part of the way that you win, or the way that you time it, or the way that you defend from a team fight. You just don't fight without a team fight, without a fountain. I know Keanu's got a bit of health behind him, so the sigils can do some work, but across 3 people with a Dragon's Breath, not going to happen. Big mistake for me from G2. I liked the idea, and that's the idea that they need to execute on when they have all of their tools in their box, but yeah, look, I think it's just rule number one of Vainglory teamfights. If you don't have a fountain, you don't teamfight.
Especially against a team that does have a fountain. G2 will
And
be able
has
to get
AoE
themselves...
damage, Dalsy.
And has AoE
has
damage.
that big AoE damage. Resonance bounces at overdrive will hurt at this stage in the game. You have to respect them. I mean, sure, plenty of you at home will have fallen prey to Vox resonance bounces, even a weapon power Vox and a turret. And Joker with Dragon's Breath, you have to respect that, don't you, Dalsy?
You certainly do. This is the team fighting composition that Salty Potatoes have. They have such wide AoE damage Scoundrel, whereas on G2 they may be able to blow up a single target. That single target almost certainly has to be the Joker, you would feel, on this Scarf. Here comes a Hellfire Brew. It is going to go out, crucibled, blocked. Potato going on to the Joker, stuffs him up. Fountain does heal him just before he goes out. Sneaky looking for a kill of his own. Joker with a Vanguard shield. He's looking to go forward. Sneaky with one. But this has not gone well for Salty Potatoes. It's a double for Dark Potato here. And now Clast will have to walk away. Not able to block up that engage from Dark Potato, and G2 find their single target damage.
Yeah, I like what G2 did in that fight as well. The Hellfire Brew to engage. It's the classic way to try and play as CP Ringo. Class trying to protect this turret from going down. The shield will regenerate, but I think G2 should. No, they're not. They're not going to be able to do this just yet. And that's a really good defense from Class. Really, really good defense from Class. As Keanu's doing his best, one more basic attack should seal the deal, but Class bought some time. Unfortunately, nothing to capitalize on here for Class. What would have been really good for Salty Potatoes is if they'd done that and then capitalized by Goldmine straight away, because they had just forced G2 back and traded for that turret. But that was a really good team fight from G2 because they stopped Joker from channeling that Dragon's Breath, a big splash damage ultimate that makes it very difficult for G2 to play around the CP Ringo because they want to group up around the sigils, they want to group up around and protect Hundor. But Dark Potato took him out of the job, and then Hundor did a really good 1v1 with Sneaky, who is going to out-damage him on a 1v1 basis right now because Hundor doesn't yet have that Eve of Harvest, which he's working towards. And that'll give him huge amounts of sustain, especially when he procs that Twirling Silver, Dalsy.
Currently, the Joker is sitting on the goal to go get himself a Broken Myth. And that's going to be a pretty big power spike for the Scarf here. Can go towards his Eve of Harvest next, Scoundrel, and sustain a little bit longer in some of these team fights. But with the Broken Myth stacking up and then the Dragon's Breath, that's when a lot of damage will come out for the Scarf. Hundor, at this 12.5-minute mark, has finished off his Eve of Harvest, so is at that 4 damage item, now working towards an Aegis to try and negate some of this Scarf damage. Good to see that team fights can go either way. I love seeing the compositions meet their win conditions in team fights at Scoundrel, showing that, you know, the CP Ringo, when played correctly around, does have viability.
Yeah.
But now we're hitting this like very crucial point in the game where the Kraken spawning soon, wins around this stage of the game, really snowballs a team into a huge advantage.
Actually, something that is really interesting to illustrate here is the decision-making that Class has to have in these team fights, especially if G2 play it the way that they just did and send Dark Potato directly at Joker, which, given the fact that Dark Potato's only got shielding on board, you imagine now that his prime directive is to just try and ignore Sneaky and go straight for Joker, because he has that shielding, he doesn't have the armor, so he can't stand up to Sneaky on a 1v1, who's going to kite him very, very rapidly because of the Sonic Zoom. Goldmine just taken, by the way, there. G2 do secure that on a pretty easy move, take it for free. But the decision-making for Clast is very interesting, Dalsy. He has to decide whether he stands back and vanguards, gauntlets, and peels for Joker, or tries to shut down Hundor on this CP Ringo by making aggressive gauntlet. And I think that's a really interesting set of decisions to be made here for Salty Potatoes, because there isn't really a right answer. I think it's very teamfight dependent, but it does mean that it's more difficult now to punish that CP Ringo because you're not categorically going to use the gauntlet to try and lock him in. You might now be using the gauntlet to peel for Joker, trying to get away Dark Potato.
Here's the engage though, Keanu making the moves, there's the goop, it doesn't get lit though, and here comes a Hellfire Brew aimed at Sneaky, blocks it up, Dragon's Breath interrupted by a stuffed. Fountain will come out, that's Joker put into Hundor, and Hundor will be able to find the kill. Sneaky going to disengage this one here. And unfortunately for the Joker, just not quite able to get his reflex block off on time to block up that stuffed ultimate. You kind of feel like if Dark Potato does hit stuffs, then Salty Potato are just that.
Yeah, and it was a really nicely time stuffed as well because it cancelled the ultimate from Joker, so he wasn't able to get that Dragon's Breath off, especially even more critically important now because you need to do that now that he's built up the Broken Myth stack. So one of the best ways to play a Scarf is build Broken Myth stacks, poke from range, get those stacks up, and then when the prime opportunity opens itself, use that Dragon's Breath to just mow down the enemy team. So it was a really nicely timed ultimate from Dark Potato. Very difficult to block a point-blank Grumpja ultimate. Very difficult to block a point-blank Grumpja ultimate because realistically, one of the only indications is the sound. It's the specific sound he makes when he channels that ultimate. Otherwise, it's very difficult to determine that between that animation and the animation of his A ability as well. So, again, he might have been able to just block it, but it's so difficult to make that kind of instinct block on a Grumpja ultimate at point-blank range. So you can't really blame Joker for that because not many people can achieve that level of reaction speed, Dalsy.
And I think that reflex block prioritization may have to be discussed if you're Salty Potatoes. Usually teams opt in for a captain blocks first thing, everyone else blocks second or whatever, but maybe the Joker needs to become responsible for just blocking the Hellfire Brew that's on top of him, and Class becomes responsible for these Grumpjaw ultimates, because you kind of have to try and work out, especially with Hellfire Brew, using a Crucible for a Hellfire Brew, unless it's like everyone's grouped up, it kind of, I feel like, is maybe a waste of that team-wide reflex block.
But there's not much else that you're going to reflex block, rather. There's two abilities that you reflex block, the Hellfire Brew and the Grumpja ultimate. Not a lot else warrants reflex blocking on a team-wide basis for Salty Potatoes. The problem is that you need to have a clear communication line about, okay, I'm blocking Hellfire Brew if it comes on me. If I have my reflex block available and I can try and block the Grumpja ultimate. When it comes to Class, the command chain's got to go down to Class and say, are you specifically, because they have their own individual reflex blocks, right? So they should be able to block a Hellfire Brew. It's probably one of the easiest abilities to block in the game because of how slow it is. So is Class literally going to be, and what you said, Dalsy, is Class literally going to be said, well, you are a Grumpja ultimate blocker. You are the guy that has to hit it if you think that Grumpja is going to ultimate us. And a lot of it comes down to prediction as well. That's a lot of way that teams block Grumpja ultimate. It's very more like a prediction game. So I think this is a difficult set of team fights for Salty Potatoes to play. And I maybe criticize G2 and how hard it could be to pull off this composition, but they are playing it really well. The decision making in these team fights are really good, Dalsy.
Certainly are. We're at 17.5 minutes now, and this Kraken has been started up by both Hundor and Dark Potato. Class is flareless. This means they have no vision that the Kraken is ongoing unless they wish to face check it. They're not going to opt in just yet. Class moving towards it, but the Kraken is practically done. It's been sneaked away, and that Salty Potatoes losing out on that big objective. Kraken now with a chance to push down the lane, Scoundrel, take away some of these turrets.
I think what you said, earlier about the flares is so sort of resonates so heavily with people that it is very difficult to make a decision like face checking Kraken when you don't have the flares. Because if in the instance that they are setting up to just bait you into a face check, you potentially lose Kraken anyway. So it's a really, really hard decision to play into. And I think Salty Potato said, look, we might just be better with a Scarf to just defend against this Kraken. Try and maybe lose one or two turrets, but we can defend this and we can take it down really easily with the goop.
You can... Oh, engage comes out from Keanu Nakoa. Class may find himself stuffed here. I'm loving this captain matchup, Scoundrel. I can see why we have opted in to have both Keanu Nakoa and Class as players to watch, because they are just influencing these games. Oh no, it's going to be a block fail, but they spit Class down immediately, not the target. Sneaky. A lot of damage onto Dark Potato. Hundor currently on the other side of a gauntlet, and this Kraken will be taken down before it takes the first Vein Crystal turret. That is a great push for G2. They get net gold worth. They're going to take away the first life of this Crystal Sentry, a bit of the jungles as well. In fact, it's the second life of the Crystal Sentry. And now they have themselves a very healthy 5,000 gold lead.
Things starting to go right for G2 here. They needed this win, by the way, Dalsy. They really needed this win, given their loss yesterday to Calamity Reborn. I don't know if they played again yesterday. I believe they did. They must have played up against Team Queso.
They didn't.
But they didn't, so they've got another game today. I mean, this is this is a good resurgence for these guys because they are fighting for a VG8 spot here. You know, they need to win this series to get their VG8. If they lose this series, they're in that basket of, you know, we are potentially looking at leaving the VG8 as one of the previous strongest teams in the region to losing our VG8 spot to a challenge battle. So they need to win this series, and you can see that they are obviously putting everything into trying to come away successful here. I wanted to chat a little bit about the decision-making of a CP Ringo, especially one with Broken Myth, Dalsy. People often say we should just channel, and a Shatterglass, well, people often say just channel your Hellfire Brew to start the engage, but it's so easily reflex blocked and you get such little value out of it that way that it's very difficult to make that assertion when you have a Broken Myth. You may want to build a good amount of Broken Myth stacks before channeling that ultimate to get, you know, the maximum amount of value out of that Hellfire Brew that you can. And that makes it a little bit harder for Hundle to time the Hellfire Brew and when to use it, which is a really interesting decision to be made.
Salty Potatoes have found Dark Potato a little bit forward, forcing out his A. Defensively gives them a bit of breathing room to move in. You can see Poison Shiv was the final item for Dark Potato, cut down the healing that the Eve of Harvest for Joker provides, as well as the Poison Shiv on Sneaky provides. This game's so important for G2, like you mentioned, since they lost against Calamity Reborn. They do play Team Queso as the last matchup of today. If they win this game against Salty Potatoes, they will go 1-for-1, or, you know, whatever it may be. Of course, we do this by win percentage and not series wins, Scoundrel. So it's more important talking about wins and losses. And for G2, they are currently 0-2 in this challenge battles. Salty Potatoes, they're 2-0 though. And so winning this against G2, theoretically their hardest opponent in the challenge battles, puts them in such a good position, because after this they play Avalanche, and they will be looking to try and take that against Avalanche as well, though we did see Avalanche take the series over Team Queso yesterday. Fight seems to be breaking out. That's a gauntlet catching Dark Potato. The silence will go through onto both Dark Potato and Hundle. There's a Hellfire's Brew. It's going on to Sneaky. Blocks it though. And now here comes that Dragon's Breath blocked up. It's great for Salty Potatoes, though Hundle does find a kill. A 1-for-1. It's a double. It is now just the supports left to go at each other. And Keanu Nakoa is going to start throwing his auto attacks at Clast. They can't kill each other, Scoundrels, so they will just, you know, give a bit of each other a love. It's a date between Arden and Lyra. You guys can get your spaghetti and meatballs ready. Some love tunes on. Bit of James Blunt. You're beautiful.
Okay. I think that was everything. That's something that no one needed to hear.
I'm just describing last night we had Scoundrel. It's going to remain in my memory for a while.
You mean you casting a tournament and I was sleeping? Their sleep was very good. Anyway, I got to give credit over to this CP Ringo. Is actually doing some serious work. The Grumpjaw, I think, needs to finish potentially Atlas Pauldrons, and then G2 might have a good advantage in this fight, because once Atlas Pauldrons completed, it gives another thing that especially Sneaky has to consider blocking here. You know, he has to consider using the reflex block to block the Atlas Pauldrons to make sure that his team fight damage doesn't go down the drain. So once those get completed for Dark Potato, which is I assume where he's going, Keanu's already got a pair, then it's, you know, there's a couple of different things that are going to have to be on the back of Sneaky's mind about reflex blocking, and that makes the Hellfire Brew potentially more influential in these fights.
Everyone grouping up in the middle of the map again. It's an Atlas Pauldron now complete for Dark Potato. If you can put it onto Sneaky, force a reflex block. We actually think that Sneaky just can't afford to reflex block the Atlas, and so that is just going to be an attack speed slow, which will prevent the breaking point stacking up. Very nice purchase. And there's a Hellfire Brew going out onto Joker. It's not blocked. Damage. That is huge damage. He's going to start burning away here. Class needs to get him out alive. Sneaky now in trouble. Dragon's Breath being channeled. That's going to be him swallowed up. But can they get him out of the belly of the Grumpjaw? He goes out. Now Hundle in a bit of trouble trying to find the kill. Joker's still alive. And that's going to be Hundle going down. A double for Sneaky, looking for a triple. The Joker somehow sustaining through it all. And they're going to take the Kraken and push the lane.
And Sneaky can push the lane because Joker on this Scarf so good at taking neutral objectives. This could be 2 turrets for the Salty Potatoes before they even need to consider pushing with Kraken. G2 are going to be staring down the end of the barrel of this Salty Potatoes roster after a catastrophic team fight. They channeled the Hellfire Brew to start. That's one of the tactics that you can do with the CP Ringo, but you need to immediately capitalize on that target. Otherwise, he was free to back off with the Eve. They didn't even force the Fountain, which is a crucial part of how that team fight went so wrong for G2. The Hellfire Brew and the follow-up did not even force the Fountain out of Clast.
Double kill.
and then Hundor stuck in the middle of things,
Triple kill.
just unable to go toe-to-toe with Sneaky with this breaking point build. Big mistake for G2 there. They needed to maybe put that stuffed out earlier. They let that Dragon's Breath channel for far too long. The damage was done by that point. G2 looking in a scary position.
That is a gauntlet channeled very early. Everyone able to walk away from it. Sneaky goes through the arcane passage, throws out a silence, and it does hit both Dark Potato and Hundor now. Kraken starting to do work, but they have to be careful. All in team fights here is devastating for Salty Potatoes without the gauntlet for the disengage. Kraken will find one turret. It is burning Dark Potato away. Broken Myth stacks and Breaking Point stacks starting to be rise. But Class gets chunked. It wasn't blocked again. This Hellfire Brew, and they're all grouped up. Dragon's Breath looking for the burn, but it's going to be another swallow. Dark Potato may lose his life. The Joker, though, goes down as well. And the Kraken looking to take a chunk out of this turret, but they're just charging forward. G2 trying to find Sneaky. They won't find him. Turret might even go down. I think Hundor might have the damage to finish it. No, maybe one more auto attack. Okay, yeah, they're going to be able to finish it before turret falls.
Oh, that's a big deal. I mean, not that much of a big deal, but you definitely don't want to leave your base completely open, because it just makes it so much more difficult for Keanu, especially, to make sure that he's getting enough scout traps down and vision down to prevent the backdoor attempt. I mean, at this point in time, it could be very well possible that Salty Potatoes find a win by running down lane, taking the turret, and distracting G2 and stopping their backs. So they have to be very careful now. And you can see Keanu making sure scout traps appear all over the lane, making sure that it's very difficult for Salty Potatoes to push up and take that base without G2 at least having an idea as to what is happening. But these fights, man, these fights are so crazy. And Dark Potato managed to get the stuff at the right time, but still G2 unable to push and capitalize on Sneaky, so able and easy for him to kite backwards on this Vox.
X-Scoundrel, every time Joker misses his reflex block on the Hellfire Brew, not only is it him who's put out of the fight for a little bit, but anyone who's standing around him. Did you see how much Class took in the chunk damage from that Hellfire Brew when Joker missed his reflex block?
It was huge.
And so it's not only punishing to you, but it's punishing to your entire team.
Yeah, I mean, you can't group up here for... Especially when that Hellfire Brew is still off cooldown, you can't group up, because even if you reflex block it, the team is going to get hit by that damage in a splash area. And I think Hundor had like 6 or 7 Broken Myth stacks before he channeled that Hellfire Brew there. So that was how huge hitting that ability can be, because at 9 Broken Myth stacks, that's what... 36% damage on ability increase, so you get a 36% increase in your Hellfire Brew damage, which is pretty insane.
Very insane. G2 looking to push forth here in the jungle. Very happy to take team fights, although the Spitfire group combination can be a little bit hurtful. Vision is there. They've got flares in their inventory. The Class actually has just ran out. Doesn't have a contraption, but the Gauntlet's going to go down. They want to fight here. Push G2 away from the shop. Class going to have to buy a couple more flares if they want to stick around the area. Hellfire Brew this time is blocked by the Joker. Does get the Vanguard shield, but it's a little bit too late to block the majority of the damage. A lot of damage still goes through that reflex block. It's just, you're not burning to your death, at least. Kraken may get stunned up.
You know what I might have preferred from Hundor instead of the Shatterglass is a Clockwork, because I think that the Achilles shots are doing so much work for G2 right now that I think getting those off cooldown more quickly might have been really influential to how they can play the fight. They do 3/4 of the Kraken work here, but they are going to force Salty Potatoes to back off. Tense moments right now for G2.
So risky going for a Kraken when your opponents are right there, especially if they can just start the team fight. You don't want to put your game 1 here to a 50-50. You want it to be a decision made that goes heavily in your favor, if not completely in your favor. Classed, 14 seconds left. That Norwave Gauntlet could be huge. Here's Joker once more, blocking the damage, but he's in trouble. Dark Potato looking for the kill. He tries to predict it, but that is huge. And now they're looking to kill them all down. Class cannot escape. Sneaky can't do the work, and that's going to be now Sneaky running for his life. They're going to start up this Kraken, it feels. Sneaky is just going to go back to base. Could just be it for G2.
That is how you capitalize on a Hellfire Brew. The portal afterwards to close the gap onto the Scarf, deliver everybody to his location and blow him up. That is how you capitalize on a Hellfire Brew. Really well played and coordinated from G2. They have to make one final push with this Kraken. By taking the Kraken, they have given Salty Potatoes another opportunity at a team fight, but it probably was the only decision that G2 could have made, given that the lane was not in their favor. If they had a wave pushing, they might have made a decision to go 3 versus 1 sneaky and just take these Vein Crystal turrets out of the picture and end the game. But the problem was the wave wasn't quite in their favor, and so they've got one more team fight to make happen here for G2. And one more defense for Salty Potatoes, because if Salty Potatoes win and get an ace in this scenario, they win the game. G2 have to make a very, very tentative push against the Salty Potatoes lineup to get those Vein Crystal turrets down.
Andor, right at the back of this team fight, going to be looking for another Hellfire Brew onto the Joker. This Kraken started up. They are going for it. Great stun, double, and here comes the Dragon's Breath. That's Kianokoa losing his life. He's getting burnt alive, and Sneaky looking for the kill. Hellfire Brew onto the Sneaky, but he gets the block. He gets the shield. Joker caught out. It's a 1-for-1 trade, and it's the carry taking down the jungler. Scarf is the main Kraken killing tool here, and G2 are just gonna look for the victory. Classed and Sneaky, I don't think can stop it. They're gonna go for it nonetheless, but Sneaky gets swallowed up, and that's just gonna be GG to G2.
Oh, they tunneled in on Lyra. I thought G2 had made a catastrophic error at the start of that fight, Dalsy. They let Sneaky get 7 breaking point stacks for free without dealing any damage back, and that's when Sneaky said, go, 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 Class, I've got 7 breaking point stacks, we can win this fight right now. And he was able to get the damage churning, but they focused the Lyra, they split their team, they let Joker be by himself against the CP Ringo and the Grumpjaw, and once the Joker was down, it was an easy turnaround to capitalize on that Kraken. Again, a very hard team fight for Salty Potatoes to make work while Kraken was bashing down those Vein Crystal turrets. What a game.
There you go, CP Ringo finds a win here, and G2 1-0 up against Salty Potatoes. Let's throw it back to our desk to break down that win.
What a way to start the day here. Incredibly close game. G2 managed to take it in the end, but both teams managing to get their opponents to just a sliver of HP. The G2 turrets survived on, 1 HP? And then they come back and take it in the end. I mean, talk me through what happened there, Bacon, because I kind of lost track of how that was all going down.
I mean, it was looking so good for Salty Potatoes because they were able to take advantage of the situations they had early on. You know, the Grumpjaw was able to just barely keep them in the game at times with some beautiful stuffs for the side of G2, but Salty Potatoes, like early on, they were dealing with the Hellfire Brews incredibly well. The gauntlets were beautiful, splitting up the members of G2, and they were blocking the Hellfire Brews and all sorts of stuff. But once we got to the late game, it was just the way that they were trying to play around this CP Ringo was not terribly intelligent. Like, they were able to G2 stayed in this game because the reflex blocks were not on point from the team of Salty Potatoes.
It definitely felt like it was down to whether Joker or Hundor could breathe fire better in this game. Both of those massive fiery ultimates seem to dictate the fights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this fight is a great example. I mean, the gauntlets were always on point for K-Last, but sometimes they weren't able to get it done. In this particular fight, they do find it, and they get their first ace of the game, which is really important for Salty Potatoes. You see right here, of course, just not able to get the stuff correctly, and of course, this Kraken push does help them secure almost all of the turrets here against G2. But things start to go a little bit south for them. Right here, they're not able to get a clean push here. They're going to allow G2 to get a little bit more time back into this fight, picking up a few kills. And from here, G2 actually does a really good job at timing as they get to later in these fights. Right here, of course, you don't want to push the Kraken so far and then give up so many unnecessary kills. And they do find the Grumpjaw here in this specific case, but of course, at the cost of both the Arden and the Scarf going down.
The sheer damage that Dark Potato gets out while on 1 HP there, that was like a third of his HP at least.
But at the same time, that's something that, again, I want to go back to the reflex block. The Crucible was used on basically nothing. Like, the Hellfire Brew came out, got blocked by Scarf, and the Crucible came out immediately afterwards. So now there's no block available to prevent that stuff from coming through and canceling the Dragon's Breath. If that Dragon's Breath goes down, they probably end up winning the game there. And then this last fight, the split, that was just, you can't split your team up this heavily and expect to win.
Yeah, and the key thing was that they were chasing the captain as well, right? Kianokoa goes all the way down there. And Salty Potatoes unfortunately fall for the bait, and it means that G2 can end the game and end that first game in a stylish fashion as well. They are now 1-up in the series.
And one other thing about the CP Ringo, and one of the reasons why I'm not a fan of it, even though it got a win here, I'm not a fan of the pick. The way that you play against it, early on, the reflex block is all you need. But once you get to late game, the damage coming out of a Hellfire Brew is still a very large chunk of damage, but you just get a Slumbering Husk. Like, I don't understand why there wasn't a Slumbering Husk on anyone on the side of Salty Potatoes. If you have that Slumbering Husk, especially when there's no echo on the Ringo, when he throws out the Hellfire Brew, you reflex block it, Slumbering Husk soaks up literally all of the damage from it. You end up losing about 100 health, and that is all of Ringo's burst just gone, and you've taken 100 damage. Like, I don't understand why you don't go towards that itemization in this game.
So maybe a little bit more defensive and smart defensive itemization coming out from Salty Potatoes. Now, moving into this second draft, do we feel like Salty Potatoes made a mistake with this draft? Do we feel like this was something that G2 clearly can deal with now, or was it just a matter of in-game plays here?
No, actually, I think it was just during the in-game. I mean, you look at, there were a lot of great mid-game fights that Salty Potatoes were able to execute. We saw great gauntlets always in choke points, but G2 outplayed them. The Grumpjaw almost never got stunned up when he got stuffed, and that's really important, and, you know, it's all a matter of inches here. I think that if you're Salty Potatoes, you actually have to feel pretty good. You went up, you know, you did some things that were really good. You just got to clean things up. Of course, what really lost in the game was, unfortunately, not having Gauntlet up in one of those last team fights and then getting split right at the end when Kraken's pushing. You just don't do that, and then maybe they would have won that game.
Maybe they would. I mean, it was literally down to wire. We are getting into this next draft. Baron going to be the first ban of this one.
Yeah, and as much as I'm criticizing Salty Potatoes for the itemization, I do want to also praise Dark Potato on the Grumpshot, his decision-making on when to go in and when to go for those stuffs. Like, he was constantly using it when the reflex blocks were not available. It was very smart. You know, oftentimes you see Grumpjaws go in right at the start and try and use it. He was waiting until he knew it would connect.
All right, well, Lyra and Vox going to be the first picks for this one. G2 getting that Vox for Hundle. We know he is very good on that Vox. We've seen him play it to a great level multiple times. And obviously, Lyra always going to be a solid first pick once that Grace is banned away. Now, moving into these first bans, what's the anticipation here? Because the bans around the second rotation are usually the comfort bans.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised here that they decided opting for the Black Feather ban instead of the Idris, because you have the Lyra already. But then Black Feather with Lyra can also be a potent combo. I'm just surprised because it's a little bit easier to counter. So now Salty Potatoes, though, they have to think about, all right, what is G2 going to be doing with that Black Feather ban? Because Idris is available, and it's likely Salty Potatoes will have the free reign to pick it. Maybe a Samuel ban here.
Yeah, I would expect Samuel, maybe Grumpjaw to come off the board for Salty Potatoes. But like I said, the Idris is very likely going to be the next pick for Salty Potatoes because I don't see G2 grabbing that one for themselves. Catherine will be the ban here, so maybe Salty Potatoes going to be looking for a Kestrel to come through. Perhaps even doing a Kestrel Idris combo for themselves. I think that could really work wonders for them as G2. Kestrel is a pretty good pick into the Idris, so they're going to go ahead and grab that Samuel. And yeah, I think a weapon Idris with a CP Kestrel would be perfect for Salty Potatoes here. You outrange your opponents and outburst them.
Yeah, it could be really powerful. We'll see where the Salty Potatoes do go for that one. Let's remember how important this game is for Salty Potatoes right now. They won their first series of this tournament, but they've got to be in that top 3. They can't really afford to lose games, and they definitely can't afford to lose this series. Glaive going to be the lock-in in the end.
Yeah, and I really hope that they now pick something that's ranged that can flex either in the jungle or in the lane, like the Kestrel that we were talking about. I think they need that. They are going to go with the Scarf. There's a lot of poke here, and one of the things I do like about this is the Glaive's going to go very deep into the fight, but he's going to likely be a weapon Glaive, so he's not going to have the ability to get out, but you have Lyra and then Scarf to help from the backline get in there and deal a lot of damage. Finn comes out here. This is definitely to help that front line because Glaive's going to be pushing in pretty deep.
Yeah, Finn going to be there to kind of body block and protect his carries on this one. But also, Finn can be useful for Salty Potatoes here. He can be that point to build up broken mid stacks for the Scarf.
He very well can be, but at the same time, if you just build a ton of shield on the Finn, the Spitfires are not going to be getting past that big tanky Finn, but it's also another option for stunning the Scarf is the big thing that they, I believe, wanted this pick for, because they really didn't have any options otherwise. You have the ultimate from Samuel, and now you have the quibbles from the Finn, but otherwise, Scarf's going to get those Dragon's Breaths off, and they are going to be a menace.
Well, we'll see if they can deal with it. They did a good job of dealing with it last game. How do you anticipate these fights going down, Dragonborn? What's the expectation coming into this game?
Oh, I really like G2's draft, actually. They really want to play it smart, though. I mean, like I said, Glaive's going to be coming in really, really deep. You want to make sure that you punish him for that. He's not going to be able to get out without a portal or a sigil to help him out. And, of course, from the backline, you've got Scarf poking. I think that when you've got that heavy Finn, he's going to have play company up a lot. He's going to want to do a lot of CC. And, of course, if you can just get one pull on the Scarf into the fight, you're going to usually win those fights. So, definitely, it's more about playstyle here. Both drafts are pretty comparable.
Okay, well, we'll see who can take this one. It's 1-0 in the series to G2, but it was an exceptionally close game. Let's see if we can go to a full 3-game series as we head into this one. Hashtag Vainglory8 on Twitter to let us know who you are voting for. But let's jump onto the Halcyon Fold as we head into Salty Potatoes versus G2 Esports.
Currently, Salty Potatoes sitting at a 2-1 record for their challenge battles after losing that game to G2. G2, they're sitting at a 1-2. So if they take this series, they take it and equal out the win percentages between themselves and Salty Potatoes. And then that third game becomes ever so much more important for these teams.
Absolutely, and G2, it's sort of imperative that they win this series to retain some sort of chance of getting back into the VG8. It'll give them confidence going to their next series as well. Very, very interesting compositions coming from either side. Very much a composition that's going to want to try and peel back for the most part from G2. They can be aggressive in the early game. They've got great siege with the Samuel. Samuel essentially creates a siege composition by himself because of how much space Drifting Dart and the Malice and Verdict gives him. But in the late game, the Prime Directive will be trying to peel back from Sneaky on this Glaive if he looks to go aggressive. It really depends on how Salty Potatoes look to play this Glaive, though. Are they going to play this Glaive to be aggressive and isolate targets, or are they going to be using it to peel back for Scarf, putting a lot of pressure on Joker's hands, who... I mean, me and Darcy were discussing this after the game. Didn't have the best Scarf game in the world that last game. Early game was fantastic, but some of those late game, really crucial micro decisions didn't quite work for Joker and did give G2 a bit of an easy time in some of those last sort of end team fights. Yeah,
like if you specifically look at the last team fight that the Joker participated in, and they chased G2 out of the base, they took down Keanu Nakoa, Sneaky, and Class chasing down. The Joker, though, he found himself with a Dragon's Breath going through the portal, putting himself behind the team a significant distance, and then turning towards Hundor and Dark Potato rather than following his team and trying to stick with the Arden for the peel potential. So basically isolating himself against two people who are going to blow you up. And that's when things definitely don't go right for a Scarf. He needs to be backlining it, but obviously when your front line runs away, then the backline becomes the front line, becomes very difficult. So that's some team-wide decisions, but also just attempts at trying to put yourself in the safest position need to be made by the Joker because Scarf is so vulnerable.
Yeah, Scarf very, very vulnerable. In this situation, though, not as vulnerable because, you know, he's not... Like I always say, when you've got this kind of squishy target in the backline, like a Celeste or a Scarf, if you're running a composition that really threatens from range, and that's what this G2 composition does, it threatens from range. There's nothing in there that's going to get at Scarf specifically, then you have a lot easier time as a Scarf because nothing's going to run at you and force you to kite backwards unless, you know, G2 have the advantage and run at you with the War Treads or whatever. But for this instance, that Joker's going to have a little bit of an easier time in these teamfight situations because he's not going to have a Grumpjaw running at him, for instance. Sneaky's on the Glaive, so there's not going to be a Glaive, you know, pioneering his way to blow up that small dragon. G2 are going to have to play a game where they win in terms of accuracy, they win in terms of how they sustain through these team fights, and sustaining against the Lyra can be very difficult. I think where G2 are going to win is actually going to be focusing Sneaky and Classed and leaving Joker till the end, which can be a very scary thing to do against the Scarf.
Yeah, considering the fact that Sneaky will be likely diving in towards the backline, talk about in a sec, Joker and Dark Potato just having a bit of a fight over these front camps. Classed rotates quickly over to provide a bit of assistance, but seems like it is going to be Keanu Nakoa moving just a little bit too late. First blood goes the Joker. Joker going to be gaining ahead early, although it's worth noting in the previous game he got ahead early as well and wasn't quite able to execute in that late game. But you think about how these endgame team fights do get executed as Scoundrel, it's very likely Sneaky jumping onto Dark Potato to try and knock him into a compromising position. And that's going to be Sneaky very far forward. Keanu Nakoa can lock him down with Quibble, Flight Company, just slow him down, and Hundor and Dark Potato can attempt to blow him up and then finish off the rest of Salty Potatoes.
You may wonder why we don't talk about Forced Accord much when it comes to a Finn. A lot of people will be saying, well, they can just pull the Scar Finn, right, with Forced Accord. It's very rare in professional level Vainglory that you ever see a Forced Accord land, at least consistently. Sometimes you can catch them off guard, sometimes you can get to a point where the Forced Accord cooldown is lower than that of a Crucible, and you find the right timing. But it's very, very rare that you often see a Forced Accord actually land onto a backline and pull them in and just cause, widespread destruction. So it'll be up to G2 to create opportunities for Forced Accords to land, rather than they just throwing them out and expecting to pull the scarf in. Because in professional level play, usually that gets blocked. Usually. I'm gonna say that with a pinch of salt. People have missed their reflex blocks before. But we generally don't talk about Forced Accord as an absolute engage tool, because for the most part, for the majority of the game, gets blocked.
And of course, there is that small window of opportunity when Force Accord is overdriven and there's a bit of cooldown reduction that it is up just before the Crucible is up. Tiniest window of opportunity. We actually saw yesterday.
We did.
Avalanche were able to execute on that small window of opportunity. The Crucible, I think, down for another 8 seconds. And they found the Forced Accord window of opportunity. So, it's not to say it's impossible, it's just to say that these things don't happen very often. So, yeah, maybe we do see one today, and maybe that's a game-winning play for Keanu Nakoa. Keep your eyes out on both the Forced Accords and the Crucibles, though, because you can kind of just watch them and see, depending on how the team fights and how everyone's positioning, whether or not Keanu Nakoa is going to be able to open that window.
And you can see Oakheart's picking up for Joker and Sneaky already. Class working very quickly towards a Crucible, because it is so important that you have those online before Keanu hits level 6. Keanu a little bit away, a whole level away from level 6 yet, and gold is in the bank for Sneaky and Joker to finish up their reflex blocks should they want them. And again, it's a little bit like Koshka. At level 6, you need to have a reflex block versus a Koshka. At level 6, you need to have a reflex block versus a Finn. The lucky thing for people playing against Finns is that generally captains or roams, whatever you call them, hit level 6 a little bit later than the jungler.
But usually about 1 or 2 minutes, so that's a lot of damage onto Class. Class may be dead here. Yeah,
nice
he is!
Nice
Very nice snipe, and Malice and Verdict comes through. Dark Potato able to find the kill onto Class. Class held onto his fountain. Really just was not expecting to be able to get sniped away there, and that is bit of an issue for Salty Potatoes. If you're not anticipating damage or anticipating these kind of things as a captain as well, then that can put you in a slightly worse position.
Something that we didn't actually mention when we're talking about this reflex block versus Finn dilemma is that you also have to have a Crucible for the Oblivion. So one way to get a good impact in a team fight is to force the Crucible with either the Oblivion or the Forced Accord, and then you just use the other, because you know that at least you're going to isolate Class if the other reflex blocks haven't been used. So personal reflex blocks will have to be saved for one of those two abilities, and also the silence coming through often is crucial that the silence gets blocked too. Lots of good ways to bait out reflex blocks here for G2 and then capitalize by using abilities that demand them anyway.
And, if the silence isn't blocked by Salty Potatoes, they try and hold on to their reflex for the Oblivion. That does open up that chance for Dark Potato to catch someone in the Oblivion in that small window when everyone is silenced. Yeah, so it's very likely Force Accord is kind of the Crucible beta, and then, you rely on Hundo and Dark Potato to try and find a catch out with their ultimates. But we'll have to see how these fights do break out, because we're at this level 6 for... Okay. Never mind. That is just huge damage. They're looking for a second kill. Another missed fountain from Classed. Have to think that perhaps the nerves and some of the mistakes from the previous game is getting to him.
In lobby, he didn't seem quite settled. Talking through lobby, he didn't seem quite settled. Joker with a great block, but it's going to force him away from the turret. G2 get a very quick early tier 1 here, and now G2 look like the VG8 team that we have known them to be. Super aggressive in the early game, although that advantage with the turret has only netted them a 700 gold advantage here, Dalsy.
Clearly making up.
Big CS lead for Joker in the jungle, sorry.
Yeah, huge CS lead. And it's a CS lead in the lane as well for Sneaky. So the mechanical skill, micro level there, really good for Salty Potatoes. They're keeping ahead of their opponents. That first blood that went over to the Joker has helped with keeping ahead of Dark Potatoes' build. You can see that the Joker is on his way towards that broken myth as well. Has that reflex block, whereas Dark Potato doesn't. He also has an energy battery. And now we'll have to see how these next team fights break out, because we do have the Crucible online for Class, the Forced Accord. It will be up in just 20 seconds time, X-Scoundrel. G2 certainly looking like a top team once more. Salty Potatoes need to get out of their own heads. This is where games are lost if you lose in your head before you even get onto the Halcyon Fold. And that is going to be troublesome. Classed. Where's your head at?
On a good Crucible though for Class, knowing that even sometimes these blind Forced Accords can be very difficult to block. It was a nicely timed Crucible, just making sure that I think Joker and him used it at the same time, and that could be an issue going forward, Dalsy. You have to have faith in your captain for these things. If you end up blowing your reflex block at the same time as your captain without giving him the trust that he is going to block it for you, that opens up opportunities for G2 to find these big impact abilities on key targets because they are blowing their reflex blocks for the same thing. I think Joker...
Also the mental aspect of if you've taken away the trust from your captain, well then that's just going to affect how your captain feels as well. So
exactly,
it's pretty huge. The team dynamics, you see this in lots of different things. CSGO, when an AWPer is struggling, sometimes teams opt to take the AWP away from him, but actually more often than not they try and get him, put the trust back in him so that he can provide that role for his team. It's the same here in Vainglory. The captain needs to be trusted to be able to block these abilities.
But G2 have found success in their early game. They had a good siege. They've made use of that siege. It's been a big win for them thus far. But it hasn't resulted in, like we said, a big gold net advantage. Only about 1,000 right now. And a lot of that comes down to how well Joker has been farming. Tato has hit a good item spike. The Broken Myth Frostburn item spike. Got the Void Battery in tow. Very, very, very nice set of items for Dark Potato to use here. He didn't have to invest that 700 gold in the reflex block, because realistically, there isn't much that you'd want to reflex block from Salty Potatoes apart from that Glaive Afterburn. But again, that might be used more an appealing tool than anything. Sticky also at an infusion. Hundor not infused right now. This could be a good time for Salty Potatoes to try and force a fight. Although Joker hasn't got his infusion, so you're relying on just a weapon power glaive with 2 items with an infusion to carry the fight, which might be difficult at this stage in the game.
And when you look at the item progression for Keanu versus Class tier, you can see the War Treads has already been completed for G2 since Keanu Nakoa doesn't have to go down the Crucible route. That provides a lot of engage potential. In fact, it's disengage potential against Sneaky as well in the Dragon's Breath. Now he's opting in for that coat of plates, the double light shielding as well, which will provide resistances with the Polite Company. So lots of advantages there with the Finn because he hasn't had to go down the Crucible route.
I believe this is what we saw Rekt do at the North American Winter or the Autumn Life Championships. Rekt was one of the first people to do this on Finn. He'd use a double tier 2 shielding on top of a fountain, and the Polite Company would then distribute stats, and that makes everyone far more tanky versus the likes of Dragon's Breath, far more tanky against the General Poke. Really interesting and unique tactic for Finn to employ, and like you said, doesn't need that reflex block or the Crucible, so can afford to do this. And it's going to make his team very tanky as a whole. He's going to finish up that second tier 2 shielding. Going to make them very resistant to that late game threat of the Scarf as well, and I really like the way that they're approaching this, a really unique and interesting way of managing things. And actually, G2 have played this mid-game period very well because they have outlasted Sneaky's infusion. Sneaky's basically wasted 500 gold as it stands. As long as they don't fight in the next sort of 45 seconds, that infusion has been a 500 gold dump for Sneaky. It's just helped him CS slightly better.
You may be looking at Sneaky and wondering why he hasn't gone for an afterburn yet. This game looked for a play. It's actually just due to the positioning of G2. They haven't allowed for Sneaky to realistically catch someone out of position. You know, there's the old quote that shots not taken are shots missed, but realistically here, when you're in such an important match, not taking a shot when you are pretty much sure that it's going to be a shot not worthwhile for your team is possibly the best score. However, that leads to passive play for Salty Potatoes. They're a team that wants to engage. They want to be able to go in and try and find these team fights. and it only bites into G2's win conditions, who are very happy with this Samuel, with this Fox to scale up, with this Finn to scale up, play at range with their Finn to provide resistances. And Salty Potatoes, they've kind of just starting to fall off a little bit. They will have late game damage. I'm not saying that they won't, but their chances of winning late game fights reduce once that Finn gets tanky and Dark Potato and Hundor are full item builds.
It gets more and more pressure on Joker himself to perform. Double Infusion comes out for G2 right now. They're going to force this fight around the gold mine. They don't want to give this away for free because they have the Infusion, so they need to try and force something here. The Drifting Dart comes out.
Wow, look at the damage onto Class. That is just huge. Once more, no Fountain. Once more, no Crucible. That's the gold miner going over. It's Joker being chased. There's the Afterburn. Sneaky. That's going to be a Oblivion used to zone, but Joker gets pulled back on in. Did not spot it and did not use his reflex block. 2 kills over to G2. And now Salty Potatoes are starting to fall to the wayside here. A turret now going to be sieged up, and I'm not sure Sneaky can protect it.
It looks like Salty Potatoes have lost the confidence that we saw them have yesterday. Not playing the same level of game as Sneaky forced to Afterburn away from this turret. G2 can now clean out any form of jungle that is left and set up for Kraken with this double infusion. And you can see Joker and Sneaky have got a bit of gold to spend here, but maybe Joker wants to finish that Eve of Harvest as a priority, which means he's not going to have gold to have an infusion to fight for this Kraken. It will have to be a miracle steal if they want to make that happen. G2 in a very strong position. Tier 3 boots, the journey boots finished for Hundor. Very mobile, gets him out of the clutches of this glaive, makes it easy for him to dive this scarf. G2 looking very strong at the end of this game right now.
Humanist put it very well in his recap of the VGL Challenger Series at Scoundrel, which was that Class is a no-breaks captain, often fully engaged, doesn't withhold, just goes full ham. This game, we have seen him hiding away in a shell. He has put the brakes on. This is devastating for Salty Potatoes. Now the Kraken being taken up. There's the engage, blocked, forced to cord, but they're going to just walk on in. They have Oblivion ready to go. It does get ignored, but the Kraken now should easily go over to G2. No steal potential, I feel, from Salty Potatoes. They may look for a fight. No, it seems like they're going to turn their rear and get ready for this defense.
Yeah, and I think putting Class on something as passive as this, you can see the confidence just isn't there for him. He's been out of position, he's been caught, hasn't made the clutch fountains, hasn't made the right crucibles often. He's positioning far too aggressive for a Lyra at times. You want, obviously, your captain to be body blocking. That's what a Finn can do, for instance. But a Lyra, she doesn't quite have the sort of tank ability to do that. She is a backline supportive captain. She should really be letting Sneaky take the front line and obviously supporting him with the movement speed and the heal. But Class has been caught out of position, and G2 are now sieging, potentially looking for a win.
Yeah, they need to engage here, Salty Potatoes, once this Kraken enters into the base and look for a teamfight win. You can see Sneaky heading into the base, going to pick himself up an upgrade of the boots, it seems. Now looking to move on in. The Kraken down to half HP. They're starting to burn it alive. Salty Potatoes are looking for an engage. Sneaky taking a lot of damage, will get stunned up. Dragon's Breath coming through, but they've got the shielding, the fortified health. And this is just going to be Salty Potatoes now defending their base. They've lost the Joker. Everyone's been pushed to healing. And that is just G2 upsetting Salty Potatoes in what seems like one of the most dominating games we've had so far at the challenge battles.
I mean, this looks like a G2 that switched everything on at the right time. This game was just absolute destruction from them. Again, Class didn't seem like he was on board. The double shielding coming out from Finn, those Dragon's Breaths, they did not have the same impact they had in the previous game. G2 looked like the professional team in this matchup, and they're going to be feeling much more comfortable now going up against Team Queso in their final game to determine whether they remain in the VG8 or not. And now suddenly, Salty Potatoes have got to win their next series, at least get a game, you feel, to give themselves a good shot.
Yeah, this becomes very exciting with both Salty Potatoes G2 vying for a Vainglory 8 spot. These challenge battles are heating up. Desk G2 take this series 2-0.